Hi, my name is Ashley Wilson, and I am going to share with you my learning around the science of teaching reading. We have four objectives for today in our time together. The first objective is the brain. We will connect how different parts of the brain work together to create skilled readers. Next, we will look at the simple view of reading, and we'll analyze how the simple view of reading leads to comprehension of reading. Thirdly, we will take a look at Scarborough's reading rope, and we will differentiate from language comprehension and word recognition and see how those are connected, which leads to skilled reading. And finally, we'll put it all together by taking a look at structured literacy, and we'll identify the components of structured literacy and the overall need for a strong implementation. First, let's take a look at the brain. This is a model with the regions associated in the brain with reading. It's important for us to note that you are not born knowing how to read, like many of us are born having the ability to speak on our brain. We actually have to build connections in our brain in order to be able to read. So what we are hardwired with is the phonological processor, which is located right here in the frontal lobe. This is the part of the brain that processes sounds. And we are also born with the orthographic processor. This is a part of the brain that's associated with storing information when it comes to sight and visual. When these two parts of the brain work together and synapses are fired in the brain, that builds the phonological assembly. You must have strong and explicit in teaching in the components of reading in order to build this. This is the part of the brain where letters connect to sounds and the phonological assembly. Let's take a look at the simple view of reading. Decoding times language comprehension equals reading comprehension. So let's break it down. Decoding is ultimately knowing the principles of the alphabet and also understanding phonics rules in order to use them when decoding. You multiply that with language comprehension, which is the ability to actually have meaning from the words that you're speaking. Then that leads to their reading comprehension. Now, it is important for us to note that we can have readers that are really strong in decoding, but really lacking in language comprehension skills. Therefore, if one area is weaker than the other, then it leads to overall lessened reading comprehension. It's important that we assess individually decoding and language comprehension in order to see where our students are and what their needs are. Additionally, that means we have to explicitly teach them separately as well in order to ensure that our students can master reading comprehension. This is a model that's often seen when it comes to the science of teaching reading, and this originates from Hollis Scarborough, and she is a psychologist who wanted to explain to parents how it works for a child to learn to become a skilled reader. And so this was the outcome. So you'll notice in this diagram, there are two strands. There's the language comprehension and there's word recognition. Language comprehension deals with background knowledge, understanding concepts based on experience many times or it being exposed through strong teaching. Vocabulary, language structures, verbal reasoning, and understanding metaphors, similes. Literacy knowledge, which is understanding how a text is made up and different genres of text. So you'll see that these are individual strands and that over time, as they're increasingly taught strategically and practiced, they become more and more automatic and eventually they become intertwined to make one strong upper strand. Let's take a look at the lower strand, word recognition. This is phonological awareness, so understanding phonemes and syllables. Decoding, which is understanding alphabetical principle and spelling and sound correspondences. And sight word recognition, which is knowing familiar words. So again, you see that these are individual strands, but when they're woven together, they build one strong lower strand. Now let's imagine for a second that some of these strands are missing. For example, language structure or vocabulary or background knowledge or decoding. When strands are missing within the rope, it does something to the rope. It makes it a lot weaker. So when weight is put on the rope, well, what does it do? It doesn't hold it. So we need to ensure as educators that we are explicitly teaching each of the parts of what it takes to become a skilled reader and that we're not ignoring any of those parts. Structured literacy is a part of the science of teaching reading as it's a structure of how we can make sure we're hitting everything that we need to hit. So let's take a look at the different components. First, we have phonology, which is the understanding of spoken words. So it's understanding sounds as we speak them. And then sound syllable is connecting a sound to an actual letter. So those phonemes actually correspond to letters. So first we learn sounds, and then we learn sounds match letters. It's also then important that we learn syllables and the different syllable types. Specifically in English, there are 6 syllable types that students need to know in order to really be very proficient at decoding unfamiliar words. Morphology can also help readers decode. Morphology is understanding the smallest unit of language, which is affixes, and we have prefixes and suffixes. And this is where morphology comes in. If you understand prefixes and suffixes in root words, then you will be more likely to be successful in decoding. Next, we have syntax. This is understanding grammar, sentence structure, and mechanics of language in order to be a proficient reader. And then the last part is semantics. So actually understanding that there's meaning of the written language. In order for a structured literacy program to be really strong, the implementation must be 3 things. It must be systematic and cumulative. Systematic meaning that it is following an order of how language should be taught, and cumulative in that it builds off of one part to the next part. Explicit as well. There has to be explicit instruction, which involves teaching of concepts directly, and there has to be continuous teacher-student support in that. Lastly, in a structured literacy implementation, there has to be diagnostic teaching. Teachers must have the capacity to individualize learning for students in small groups, and even more so personalized than just in a small group, but one-on-one as well. So today we learned about the brain and how it's wired to help us to learn to read. We learned about the simple view of reading of decoding times language comprehension equals reading comprehension. We learned about Scarborough's reading rope and the upper strand and lower strand. And we just completed learning about structured literacy and implementation. Before I leave you, I want to leave you with this quote. Teaching or watching kids learn to read is pure magic. Knowing how they get there, on the other hand, is all science. And that is from the Science of Reading, the podcast, which I encourage you to check out for some more learning. Additionally, if you're looking for even more learning, there is a list of resources here. These are things that I have researched in order to share this with you today, and I encourage you to seek out these resources and come to your own understanding of what is the science of teaching reading, and we're all growing together. Thank you so much.